Hey guys. First off, I just want to say sorry for not posting a video for the Leon Edwards versus Donald Cerrone fight. I was really busy with work and school. Just didn't really have enough time to put it out. Poor time management. Anyways, so I'm doing the breakdown for UFC 226 now. This is a fantastic card. I said that about 225, but this card looks even better. Um, this is the kind of card that only happens like more like once a year. I think that this is obviously the card of the year so far. I think it's better than 225. I think the only card that could possibly beat it later in the year is UFC 230. That's the UFC's 30th anniversary, and they're having it at Madison Square Garden, so you know they're going to want to beef up that card as much as possible. Um, but the other thing I want to talk about is that big names on the card doesn't always equal like big results. So like if you look at UFC 200, right? I think UFC 200 had until before that there wasn't a bigger card than UFC 200. There wasn't any bigger names, incredible fights all around from the early prelims to the prelims to the main card. However, most of the finishes happened on the early prelims, and apart from that, there was only 5 finishes on the card, which is out of 12 fights. That's a pretty low number. And for the names that the card had, you really people were expecting more finishes. So I just want people to be cautious about that coming into this fight. Don't expect every fight to be a finish. Expect a lot of like technical fights, a lot of strategy, a lot of people showcasing their skills, and kind of like enjoy that and more than looking for finishes. So the first fight we're breaking down is Paul Felder, who's coming in off short notice versus Mike Perry. This was originally supposed to be Mike Perry versus Yancy Medeiros. However, Medeiros got injured. Paul Felder, who just lost his opponent because Justin Gaethje's opponent got hurt for the Idaho card. Um, he said he was about at 170, so he said, you know what, why not? I'll make my welterweight debut against Mike Perry on like what is it? I think it's a little over a week's notice. Anyways, he was still training. It isn't like he had to, go start cutting weight immediately. So he's just like already around 170. Um, so let's talk about Paul Felder first. So Paul Felder's traditionally a lightweight. He fights at 155. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He's been around the sport for a while. Has some pretty good fights, especially with Edson Barboza. Um, Started off his career as a striker. Definitely looked for like more of the flashy strikes, spinning kicks, uh, spinning back fists, stuff like that. And now has transitioned to more of a ground and pound fighter. Looks to get the fight to the ground, end it with elbows, ground and pound, anything he can. And he just has a lot of experience fighting in the UFC. His opponent Mike Perry has been on a 3 fight losing streak. He lost his last 3 fights, I believe, and but he's kind of been a fan favorite, mostly because of the way he portrays himself, the way he talks. But I'll never forget. I saw an article that said, I think the headline went along the lines of, like, we have to face it, Mike Perry isn't as good as we want him to be. And there's nothing more true than that. Mike Perry, people want to rally behind Mike Perry. They want him to get the good fights. They want him to fight people like Darren Till. However, he's just missing those big fights. Lost to Ponzinibbio, lost to his last fight against Max Griffin. And all of that's due, what I think all of that was due to his training camp. Um, he fought a bit reckless. He does have big power in his hands, but he did fight a bit reckless. Looked for the knockout a little too much, headhunted a little too much, and then would like try to rally in the third round and just couldn't. However, he has changed his camp. He got a new head coach. His old head coach, I believe, was his girlfriend. They've broken up, and now he's got like a real head coach, like from his, I'm not sure what gym he's training at now, but I think it's from his gym. But the Yancy Medeiros fight was a good matchup for Perry. I believe Perry could have easily taken that. However, Paul Felder, I think, is just too experienced for Perry. I don't know how much Perry's going to change up his game plan coming into this fight. I think Felder is going to just work around him, pick him apart with strikes. Probably get him to the ground, but I think that's probably be the end of Perry once he gets into the ground. I'm not saying it's going to be a finish. I have Paul Felder winning this fight by a decision. So the next fight we're going to be looking at is Dan Hooker versus Gilbert Burns. This is a fight I've been looking forward to for a while. I've watched these two guys for a little bit, and they're not new in the UFC, but they have just kind of started to make a name for themselves. Uh, Dan Hooker has recently moved up from the 145-pound division and has just been going on a complete tear through the lightweight division, just demolishing anyone they put in front of him. Ross Pearson, Jim Miller, Mark Jacasey, just absolutely demolishing these guys. Um, he has incredible timing. Likes to use knees, um, and those knees are just deadly. You seen what they did to Ross Pearson and Jim Miller. I mean, those guys got hit by the knee and they were just out cold. And he times them perfectly. Like, there's not many fighters you can find that just have better timing than Dan Hooker. But on the other side, you have Gilbert Burns, who likes to look for submissions, but has recently kind of started striking a bit more, and he's shown to have some real power in his hands. I mean, he's not great with takedown defense, but he will often just rock his opponents on the feet, kind of get into slugfests a little bit. But what I think is going to happen in this fight is I just mentioned that Dan Hooker can time knees perfectly, especially when his opponent ducks his head. Gilbert Burns throws a lot of overhands and a lot of hooks with his head ducked. I see this fight. I see Dan kind of making the read in the first round, maybe getting hit by a couple strikes or just avoiding some hooks and overhands from Gilbert Burns. And then in the second round, he's going to recognize it. Gilbert Burns is going to go for an overhand or a hook. Hooker is going to hit him with a knee and knock him out in the second round. So I've got Dan Hooker by knockout in the second round. So the next fight we're looking at is Rafael Assunção versus Rob Font. Now, this is a fight a lot of people are overlooking. They're not really giving it much attention. However, I think this is a very slept-on fight. I think this is going to be a great fight. Both of these guys have proved themselves in the octagon. And let's start off talking about Assunção. So he's won 3 of his last 4 fights. His only loss being to T.J. Dillashaw, who's the current champ. Um, he did have a good performance in his last fight where he won by knockout in the 3rd round. He's a very well-rounded fighter. Likes to strike, but also likes to get the takedowns, go for submissions. He has a pretty good ground game. And he's fighting a guy like Rob Font, who I believe is incredibly underrated. I'm glad to see him get a fight against such a high-ranked guy. I believe this is his chance to leapfrog the division and begin to make waves in the 135-pound division, which in my eyes has gone a bit stale, but it has gotten, there is a bit of waves going through it now with Marlon Moraes and Aljamain Sterling getting big wins. Hopefully adding Rob Font to the top of the division will shake things up even more. His last performance against Thomas Almeida was absolutely fantastic. He dismantled Almeida throughout the entire fight and just had a beautiful finish. He's got great hands, good power for 135 pounder, and incredible speed even for someone at that weight class. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him. I think Assunção might be sleeping on him. Doesn't really take him too seriously. So I'm gonna say that Font does the same thing he did to Almeida. He picks Assunção apart on the feet for the entire 3 rounds, and while he probably won't get the finish, I believe it'll be enough to stuff the takedowns. It'll be enough to stop the offense of Assunção, and I believe he'll take a decision win. Next up, we got Uriah Hall versus Paulo Costa. This is a fight. This might be my most anticipated fight of the entire card. Uriah Hall was one of my favorite fighters when he debuted on The Ultimate Fighter. I've mentioned that I'm a huge Kelvin Gastelum fan, so he was my second favorite. Hall, got beat by my boy. Anyways, Uriah Hall was a huge prospect when he debuted. He got that insane spinning kick knockout during the preliminaries, I think, and just made like huge waves as not a prospect, but as a new fighter, a guy who hadn't even made his UFC debut yet. Everyone was looking at this guy and waiting for him to jump into the UFC. However, ever since that loss to Kelvin Gastelum at the finale of The Ultimate Fighter, he has kind of not kind of, he has declined, very much so. His last fight, he did not take the weight cutting seriously, was rushed to the hospital on the day of, forced to pull out, received a bunch of bad publicity and a bunch of backlash from Dana White. Um, However, has retained a little bit of the fighting style he had on The Ultimate Fighter. He still likes to throw flashier kicks. Has decent power in his hands for a middleweight. He is a bit weak against takedowns, especially against Kelvin Gastelum. That was his big weakness. He showed he was really easy to take down and keep down once you got him there. Um, on the other side, you have Paulo Costa, who is, I believe he could be a possible future champion. I mean, this guy is just built like an animal. I mean, like like he's like, where's USADA when you need them? I mean, they just like they need to get on top of this guy, because if this is natural, I mean, these are the best genes we've seen in the UFC since Yoel Romero. Um, he has come off a good win against Johnny Hendricks. However, Johnny Hendricks is, a bit washed up. I mean, he's not the fighter he used to be. Um, wasn't really a huge test for Paulo. I think he did get rocked maybe once in the fight, or got stung or stunned just a bit by Johnny Hendricks, but nothing too serious. Wasn't a really big test. I do believe this is his first really big test against Uriah Hall. Um, Paulo Costa has incredible power, even for a 185er. I mean, this guy could probably knock light heavyweights out. He's just I'm gonna keep saying this. This guy is a monster. I mean, I do not see him losing this fight at all. I'm gonna say it straight up. I think he's going to just be way too much for Uriah Hall. However, I think Uriah Hall, sorry, could hold his own for the first round. Possibly gets maybe just too much for him in the second round, and I'm gonna say Paulo Costa wins by a second round knockout. So the next fight we're looking at is Michael Chiesa versus Anthony Pettis. This fight was originally scheduled for UFC 223. However, Michael Chiesa had to pull out as a result of an injury he sustained due to McGregor throwing a dolly at a bus that Michael Chiesa was on. Um, Michael Chiesa has never had a knockout win in the UFC. So that alone should tell you about where he likes to fight. He likes to take the fights to the ground, look for a submission. However, in his last few fights, he has shown to be susceptible to submission. Um, his last loss to Kevin Lee, his loss to Jorge Masvidal, and it's weird to see a fighter who's really good at getting submissions also is weak against submissions. So a little bit of a double-edged sword there if he gets the fight to the ground. If he gets reversed, or if if he leaves his back open, Pettis is not a fighter you want to mess around with on the ground. He is typically a striker, but he does have decent ground game. He does know how to go for submissions. He he can hold his own on the ground, is what I'm trying to say. However, Anthony Pettis is a shell of the person he used to be. I mean, this guy was one of the most dominant champs in UFC history, and now he's just getting beat left and right by featherweights. I mean, he's just out of his prime. Simple as that. He, like I said before, he's a striker, but he can hold his own on the ground. However, I believe that Chiesa, I don't believe Chiesa is going to hurt him on the feet. I think he's going to be able to get the fight to the ground pretty easily, wear Pettis out for 3 rounds, and then in the third maybe sink in a submission and get the win. So I have Michael Chiesa winning by a third round submission. So the next fight we're looking at is a lot of people's most anticipated fight on the card. Not mine personally. I said mine was Hall versus Costa, but this would be a close second for me. It's Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. These two guys love to throw hands. They throw. These are two of the hardest punchers in the UFC. I mean, Francis Ngannou broke the record for the hardest punch thrown by a human. That alone should say enough about him. Um, like I said, like this man has insane power. However, in his last fight against Stipe, he showed two big things that other fighters would should take pay attention to or take notice of. The first being that he has a chin. We never really seen him get hit. Stipe hit him with some pretty hard shots and couldn't put him away. So we saw that he has a chin and is able to take punches pretty well. The other thing we saw is that he's extremely susceptible and weak to ground any kind of ground attack or grappling. Once he's on the ground, he can kind of hold his own. However, it's really hard for him to stop the takedowns. However, that shouldn't be a problem because he's fighting Derek Lewis, who's another guy who likes to throw haymakers, likes to slug it out with his opponent. Doesn't really look for too many takedowns. I mean, he has done it before, but I doubt he's going to look for any takedowns here. He wants this to be a slugfest. Um, like I said, he's a good striker. He has good endurance. He also has a chin and great recovery time. I mean, his last fight against Marcin Tybura, everyone counted him out in that third round, and then just out of nowhere hits his opponent with a massive strike and wins the fight. That was I was watching that live, and that was one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Um, However, my big problem with him, and this is gonna go into the end of the fight, I think he likes to get hit just a bit too much. He's comfortable with getting hit. He has a little too much faith in his chin. We've seen this against Mark Hunt. I mean, listen, just because you have faith in your chin, you don't think you're gonna get knocked out, doesn't mean the ref isn't gonna jump in there and try to stop the fight. Um, I think that's gonna, like I said, I think that's gonna play into the end of the fight. I think Ngannou is not the kind of guy you can just take punches or not take seriously. And I think Ngannou's going to hit him with just a massive strike in the second, drop him to the ground, and just jump on him and not let him up. And if he doesn't win by a second round knockout, I think he'll probably win by a decision. But yeah, I'm going to give this to Francis Ngannou by a second round knockout. Next up is a fight I've been waiting for a long time. I mean, ever since Ortega has kind of like started making waves in the division. And that's Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega. Let's talk about Max Holloway first. Max Holloway has been a phenomenal champion. He dismantled Jose Aldo twice, which is something that only Conor McGregor has done, and that kind of puts into perspective where he lies amongst the greats. Not saying he's the best featherweight of all time, but I'm just saying if he does beat Brian Ortega, you could potentially put him in the running for one of the best featherweights of all time, not one of the best of all time, period. Um, Max Holloway has great hand speed and great, really not underrated, but you look at Max Holloway, he's a tall, lanky guy, and you wouldn't expect him to have that kind of power that he has. Especially when you see how fast he throws his hands. So usually people either have power or speed. Max Holloway has both. He's got good takedown defense and can land some pretty good takedowns if he needs. On the other side, you have one of the best prospects the 145-pound division has ever seen in Brian Ortega. He is one of the best BJJ practitioners I have ever seen in this sport. He has just incredible submission skills. If you want to see what I'm talking about, go watch the Cub Swanson Brian Ortega fight, and you'll see the submission that he locks onto Cub Swanson. For those of you who don't know and don't want to go watch the video, he locked onto Cub Swanson while they were both standing, jumped off the fence, wrapped his legs around Swanson's waist, literally adjusted his hands while hanging off of Swanson's neck to make the grip tighter. And Swanson said in a post-fight interview, he's like, listen, I thought my head was going to come off, or I thought it was going to die. I just freaked out and tapped. And you can just tell, I mean, Brian Ortega is something else. In his last fight, he answered a lot of questions, which is, can he stand and trade? Does he have knockout power? And the answer is yes. He has some of the most incredible knockout power I've ever seen. And I know what you're saying, like, oh, how are you basing this off of one fight? He's the first guy to finish Frankie Edgar in over 30 fights. Frankie Edgar has had over 30 fights in mixed martial arts, and Brian Ortega was the first guy to finish him with one of the most insane uppercuts I've ever seen. Frankie Edgar literally got lifted off of his feet. Um, so how do I think this fight is gonna go? Neither of these guys show too many holes in their game. Max Holloway does get hit a little bit too much. We saw that in the first Jose Aldo fight. However, it looks like he adjusted and fixed that. Um, but I think when you're fighting Brian Ortega, you have to game plan hard. And not only that, you have to have a really, really solid game plan. I mean, I think Max Holloway is just going to be a little bit too scared of the takedowns. He's not going to want to go to the ground. Brian Ortega is going to light him up on the feet. Maybe, I think he's going to hurt him. And I think we're going to see another crazy submission. Something like we haven't seen in the sport before, or we haven't seen in a while. Um, Anyways, I think Brian Ortega is going to win by a second round submission. And now, finally, we get to the main event, the super fight. It's the one that people never thought would happen. Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier, the heavyweight champion of the world versus the light heavyweight champion of the world. It's incredible this fight's even happening. I mean, I never thought it was happening when the rumors came out, like, oh, they were looking for a super fight. I never gave it a second thought. Now it's happening. I saw both of these guys live at UFC. I think it was 220 in Boston, and I never thought I'd see them fight each other. But let's talk about Stipe. Stipe is possibly one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. I'm not going to go into too much detail about why. There's plenty of other videos as to why certain people think this. I think MMA On Point has a great video on this. Stipe has great power. Has the power to knock someone out while moving backwards, which is if you know anything about mixed martial arts or fighting, you know how hard that is to do. You can't really generate too much power when you're moving backwards. However, Stipe was able to knock Fabrizio Verdun out cold while moving backwards, which is insane on its own. Apart from this, he's a great wrestler. He can use grappling. Pretty much nullified Francis Ngannou with his wrestling once he got him to the ground. Did not let up. Did not let him back up. And in the Ngannou fight, we also saw that Stipe has a pretty good chin. He's able to take a punch from, like I said before, the guy who's broken the record for the hardest punch thrown by a human. And if you can take a punch from that guy, you can take a punch from anyone. I mean, Stipe is just incredible. Like I said, one of the best heavyweights of all time. On the other side, you have Daniel Cormier, who's probably, I might upset a lot of people by saying this, but probably the second greatest light heavyweight of all time, behind everyone's favorite John Jones. But apart from that, let's move away from Daniel Cormier at light heavyweight. He's undefeated at heavyweight. Entered the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix with I think he was like a plus like 500 or up underdog, and absolutely dominated. Went on to win the Grand Prix, which is insane. Everyone's counting DC out of this fight. No one's giving him much of a chance, which kind of confuses me because, like I said, DC's undefeated at heavyweight. He's also people are saying he doesn't have good power at heavyweight. He's not going to be able to pick Stipe up. Daniel Cormier picked up Josh Barnett and slammed him. If he picked up Josh Barnett, he's sure as hell going to be able to pick up Stipe. Plus he's not cutting any weight. The 205 weight cut is rough for him, but he's got good power at light heavyweight. I don't see why he wouldn't have good power at heavyweight when he's not cutting weight. He's got more mass on him. He's more comfortable. He's gonna have more power in his hands, and I don't get why everyone's counting him out here. That being said, I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's going to upset everybody. I think he's going to be able to literally silence the crowd when in the middle of the fight he picks Stipe up with a high crotch takedown and slams him over his shoulder. I think DC is gonna win this fight by decision, and we're gonna see both belts change tonight. Not tonight, UFC 226. So yeah, those are my picks for UFC 226. Like I said, it's overall a fantastic card. Great names on the card, great matchups, and I believe we should see some good fights. Um, like I said, quick summary. I think both belts are going to change tonight. I said it again. I think both belts are going to change at 226, and we'll see two new champions. What happens from there? I don't know. I'll think about that, and of course, I'll make the video. The future matchups and results. If there's any news that comes out, I'll make a video about it. Um, yeah, my next video after this will probably be the 220. I might do the 226 and Ultimate Fighter results all in one video. Might just be easier that way. Because the two fights happen Friday and Saturday. So yeah, I think that'll be easier. So I'll probably just do one big video. So yeah, that's about it. Leave a comment below, which you guys let me know what I can improve on, and that's it. Yeah. See ya.